Welcome, everyone, to the Unfiltered podcast. Lee Stephenson here, Executive Director of Church Planting with Converge, local church planter in Orlando.
I'm Danny Parmelee. I oversee church planting for Converge, Mid-America, and Southeast, and we are recording from the Nashville studio, and we are going to start out by having Taylor Swift lead us in some worship.
So go ahead, Taylor.
Oh, man, she just canceled.
That's what I hear she kind of does occasionally. So at least we're not high enough on the list, so I don't want to get sued by her.
Yeah, she is in the neighborhood, but I've never seen her. So.
Yeah. Maybe one of these days.
Anyhow,
part of our conversation today is just that next step for any church plant, where I know as a young church planter, like the next step, I wanted to get out of a portable situation and get the most permanent kind of situation I possibly could. Whether or not that was a long-term lease situation based on your context, like if you're in a more urban area, that may be your reality. Or eventually getting property with the idea of building a building, which I love because that creates a level of we're stakeholders in the community and people see you as being a part of the community long term. So I do think that there is a power, if available, to be able to get into that more kind of permanent property. But there are things that churches and church planners need to watch out for along the way, because you can kind of get yourself in trouble. And so the first question I'll just pose to you, Danny: when do you think a church planner is actually ready either to sign a long-term lease situation or buy that piece of property?
Yeah, I think that's a hard question to answer, again, because of how circumstantial each different thing is. And I would maybe go back, as you say, it's the next step. I think that almost every church planner dreams of the day before they ever even start, of when they get into the building. And so I think there's kind of a split. What I would say is that you should be planning for that from day one, but at the same time, not actually make that your goal. So there's a little bit of
your idol.
Don't make that your idol. So there's that tension where I'm going to tell a church planner, you need to be thinking of that, because it's going to change even how you're looking at opportunities, how you're even making decisions. But you don't want it clouded to be, well, we can't do this because by this date we're going to have a building, or this is the building. So other church planners, they fall in love with some. There was an abandoned Lowe's that from day one, I'm like, that's it. God spoke to me. We're getting that. I mean, we would do prayer walks around that thing. I would envision, I would hire architects to, put a little sign, vision board type of thing. We never got the building. Okay. So to this day, who knows? Maybe God, I think it's still empty. It's been empty for like 10 years. But anyways, I think there is a little bit of a danger of doing that, but to not say it doesn't matter at all, because you and I both know that while the church is the people, it's not a building, exactly what you said, what it communicates, even to non-believers, about being rooted in the community, security, just all of those different things. A building can be an absolute huge tool. So this is where I would say, if you asked a question like the when, get a lot of counsel on this when you get to that point, and get it not from your launch team that is sick of setting up chairs, because they're just getting.
They've done it for 4 months.
Yeah. Or even if you've been doing it for many, many years, you can just be so clouded by the. It's like, we just got to get out of here. We just have to do this. Everyone is sick of doing it, because there's going to be some things where it makes sense, where it's healthy for you, and it may even be a risk, but there's still a calculated risk. It's definitely not going to solve your problem. So maybe I could say that don't do it if you think it's going to solve any of the problems that you have, problems with leadership, problems with attrition of people. It's not going to solve the problems. It's actually just going to change and give you a new set of problems.
In a way, because all of a sudden you attract a whole nother herd of people too. That can become problematic. Kind of those church people that are just waiting for you to, they made it. Okay, now we're going to come here and bring our problems with us into this situation. Let alone I think one of the things that oftentimes pastors, they don't calculate the actual cost of owning their own property.
Right.
When it comes to cleaning, how are we going to structure just the cleaning process, let alone pay? Are we going to hire it out? and hire a contractor, or are we going to have our own staff? I mean, down to the cleaning supplies to keeping toilet paper on.
Yeah. Oh, I was janitor for a while.
Yeah. I mean, you
and lead pastor at the same time.
You do what you got to do at times. But even to think through HVACs, I think we had to replace within the first 3 months of being on our property, like 4 HVAC systems.
Yeah.
That's significant cost. And so sometimes you can get so focused in on, man, I just got to get there, that you overlook, well, it says in the lease, we actually have to replace an HVAC system.
Yeah.
Well, the landlord just won.
Right.
Those situations. So my biggest recommendation to pastors is, unless you have a lot of experience in real estate, you're not an expert. Mm-hmm. And so find the experts that live in this area, because most landlords or people that are going to be selling property, whether or not it's land or land with a building or something of that sort, they've been in this side of the world a long time, and they're professionals at this. They know what to do, and they have a different level of boldness to try to win the deal.
Yeah.
And so they're removed emotionally. They don't care about you as a church from that standpoint. They really care more about the dollar. And so it's a rare thing if you find an owner that's selling you because they really want you as a church to have.
Oh, they'll say that though, just so you know.
Oh, they will.
Because I hear from church, but this guy said that, he believes in our mission. And I'm like, if he believes in the mission, then that'll be reflected in the price. Tell him to give it to you for free. So.
And I've seen so many churches and pastors taken because they knew that the pastor was clouded and didn't know this area, and so they'll work things into the contract that you had no idea were there until it becomes problematic later on.
So let me give a couple very practical things to go back to your original question of the win. So when I say start from the very beginning, there's 2 things. One is that you should have a savings plan built into your budget from day one. So I would even say that if you put 10% away, first of all, you're kind of just building up your emergency fund, which we called our boiler fund because our boiler did go out. It was $30,000 and we were a little young church. It's like, oh my goodness, thank goodness we had that emergency fund. But you're building up that emergency fund from the very beginning. But you're also going to have cash reserves so that when property does come up, whether it's lease or own, because even if it's lease, there's going to be build out and all of those types of things, that you're even a player that they'll even look at you. Because if you're like, oh, well, I'm just going to do a quick capital campaign. No. Cash is what talks. You need to be able to show that you've got reserves to be able to do it, and reserves that once you buy it, that you'd be able to handle if some sort of fix or catastrophe type of thing happen. The other thing goes to what you said as far as a professional is in the beginning, just even as you're networking in the community, it's okay as you meet realtors say, hey, someday we hope to get into building. So if you ever see something that you think might work for us, come and let us know, because there's lots of real estate that exchanges hands before it ever hits on the open market for whatever reason, where people want to explore selling things before it's kind of a public thing, or they it doesn't look good for them to have vacancy. So if they can get some sort of transition plan where it's rental space, someone moves out and you move in, and they never have to put it up as far as a rental space. So just as you network, and it's not like you're finding one realtor that they're now your buyer's agent. Eventually you'll get to that place. But in the beginning, that you're always telling everybody, hey, if you ever hear of things, and this is also how properties get donated for free. So I've been part of those, even Epicos recently. They were, maybe it wasn't given, maybe it wasn't gifted, but it might have been. It actually might have been gifted. Was it?
I think it was. Yeah.
They had to gift it, and the church plant that I'm a part of right now, the building got gifted to them from another church that was, going under or kind of changing and transitioning. Another one in Seattle. This was like a multi-million-dollar building that got handed over to a church planter. So the more that people kind of know, and you're kind of making those kind of things of, hey, someday, then people will come and contact you. And at the same time, you're always just looking, even when you're driving around to pick up your kids from.
And I would say praying too.
And praying. Gosh, you always have to give the Jesus juke spiritual answer, Lee. Thanks.
Well, our building back in Arizona from our first church plant, I prayed for that for a couple of years. I drive by and just say, God, if that ever comes available, we would love to have that. And a couple of years later, God answered that very prayer.
Yeah.
But it was interesting, even in our conversations, because we moved in as a tenant and we leased a space for about 14 months. And then eventually I was able to convince the owner to sell us the property.
Yeah.
But when we were negotiating the lease and even the sale, they brought this guy in that was their lead negotiator. And he was a businessman, owned 40 properties around the United States. I mean, owned the ranch in Vegas next to Wayne Newton.
Yeah.
And I really quick went, I'm way out of my league
Yeah.
on this one. And so at that point, it was like, I've got to educate myself quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I grabbed resources. I'm reading blogs. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm reading books. I'm interviewing real estate people, taking them out to lunch. Just teach me. Yeah. And then I built a friendship with a commercial real estate guy and just said, hey, I need you to walk with us step by step through this. What are we not asking?
Right.
What do we not know? And that was, I can tell you, that was so helpful and beneficial in that whole process.
Yeah. The other person that I would say get on your team when things start to get serious is to have a commercial real estate attorney. So the money that we paid, and we're talking thousands of dollars. So maybe like $2,000 to $3,000, maybe $4,000 total that we did for a couple of the different properties that we purchased, saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you would say, oh, how is that possible? Well, the commercial real estate person, even if it's someone that you know is a friend, is in your church, or they're completely not, they still do represent one person. That's themselves. so they can get the deal done, and they're not looking with that extra eye. And our commercial real estate person, who I have used the same person for all of our different deals, would look at it and find little things here and there that were tied back to city ordinances, whatever, and was able to, like I said, saved us tons and tons of headaches. And so in the beginning, you're like, oh man, we need every dollar because we're going to, we need that $4,000 to put in the jungle gym for the kids or whatever it is. And you're thinking, oh, we can't spend it on that. It seems like such a waste. I am telling you, having professional legal to look over before you sign any sort of lease, and definitely in purchasing of property, everything with environmental factor. I mean, there are just so many things that
you can get yourself in serious trouble.
Serious trouble.
Yeah. So a couple things: do your homework. Mm-hmm. Make sure you're setting yourself up financially way before even that day comes. Be ready to raise money. Do capital campaigns. When did you guys do your first capital campaign, Danny?
So on our first building that we bought, the old Presbyterian church, I was scared to do a capital campaign. So we didn't, and we just, because we had saved money, we were able to use that. And then we went to Cornerstone Fund, which is, for those that are part of Converge, it's the lending arm, if you will, of Converge, which we would not have gotten a loan. No bank would have let a bunch of ragamuffin
young church
20. We had, our income was, not that great, and we were just a bunch of ragamuffin. So anyways, thank goodness. So we got that building, but for our second building, we had to do a campaign because of the amount of build out. Needed about $2 million in build out. And I was so scared to do that, but it was the most amazing thing in the world. It was so much more about vision. The congregation loved it. There was no arm twisting. We did that. I'm trying to remember, because we had, it was still even in, like, we had a contract, but it wasn't closed yet because there was contingencies. We built a lot of contingencies. In other words, like, we're not going to buy this unless, the city removes the raise order, we raise the funds, we get the financing, and we had it so that we weren't all of a sudden just stuck owning a building, and that was actually a liability instead of an asset. So, wow. One other thing, now I lost my train of thought on it.
Well, while you think of that,
yes.
I would just say to our church plants out there specifically that are part of the Converge family, reach out to Cornerstone Fund, based in our Chicago office, and engage them. They are more than happy to walk with you and help you know, hey, these are the things we're going to look for before you could ever get a loan. And so you can actually get ahead of the curve in the way that you do your accounting, your bookkeeping, and begin to know what they're going to be looking for. So that way you don't get slowed down in the process. Because I've seen churches go, hey, we're in a good financial spot. they come to try to get a loan and they face questions that they don't even know how to answer, and it delays the process. You could lose a deal just because of that delay. And so go ahead and do a little bit of that extra work ahead of time. And I know that they'll be more than happy to walk with you to help you know, hey, these are the things that we're going to be looking for. Make sure you're setting yourself up accordingly.
Yeah. Okay. I remember what I was going to say. Yeah. With church planters, a lot of times they think that their goal is to own the building, where a slight change in just understanding is really what you want is freedom in facility use. So when you're renting in the beginning, you're like, well, we only get it for Sundays, whether that's a school or theater, or you're renting from another church, and you're thinking, man, if we owned a building, it's all. What you're really looking for is the freedom. So there are rental situations where you're not actually owning it, even when you're borrowing from another church, maybe they're on decline. Don't think in your mind that the goal is owning its freedom. So sometimes you can actually get that freedom without it being an extra cost or an extra responsibility. Because the great thing about freedom of use, so let's say you're there's another church, they're kind of dwindling down, and you're like, well, if we own it, then we get to use it on Sunday at 10 a.m. You don't need to own it. Maybe you have a conversation and say, hey, can you switch your times? Hey, can you meet in the youth wing and we get to meet here? Or how about, X, Y, and Z? And so you're trying to really just figure out how you have freedom of use, not how do you have the responsibility of paying a mortgage or something like that. Because then if you outgrow it, then you don't even have to worry about selling it.
Exactly. Exactly. No, that's wonderful. Good advice. Well, fun conversation, just talking about preparing yourself for that property, whether or not it be a lease, whether or not it's a purchase down the road. I think the biggest thing is trust the Lord. Trust the Lord. He'll open the right doors at the right time. He'll also shut the doors when they need to be shut. And so don't force something that's not there. Thanks so much for tuning in. This has been the Unfiltered Podcast. Until next time, keep it real.